This is Raul Lopez, and you're listening to How Do You Say Success in Spanglish? The path to success isn't easy. For minorities and people of color, many attempt this journey with little to no guidance. Join me as I sit down with individuals who share their stories of perseverance so that together we can learn how to say success in Spanglish. What's good, mi gente? It's your boy Raul. Welcome back. This is How Do You Say Success in Spanglish. Today, my guest is Dr. Raul Fernandez. How's it going, Raul? How you doing?
What's up? Good to see you, brother.
Hey, good to see you too, bro. As always, it's going to be really weird talking to someone else who's a Raul. So I'm not used to calling other people Raul all the time, so this is going to be fun. But Raul is a longtime friend of mine. I always appreciate he's one of my fraternity brothers as well. So I'm so glad you're able to get on the show. So just for a little background on Raul, Dr. Raul Fernandez is a senior lecturer at Boston University, where he studies, writes, and teaches about inequalities in education. He is also chair of the Racial Imbalance Advisory Council, where he advises the Mass Commissioner of Education and Board of Education on school desegregation in public schools in the Commonwealth. In the last years alone, Dr. Fernandez wrote a piece that helped topple a monument to white supremacy, created a film series that engaged thousands of participants in challenging dialogues, and trained thousands more in equitable policymaking at institutions in the U.S. and abroad. Dr. Fernandez also served as a member of Brookline Select Board, the first Latinx person elected to that position. During his time there, he created a working group to support public housing residents, a racial equity advancement fund, and a task force to reimagine public safety. Dr. Fernandez is also the policy chair on the board of Amplifying Latinx, which seeks to build economic and political power for Latinos in Massachusetts, and a board member of Commonwealth Kitchen, which supports women and people of color in starting food businesses. He is also the founding executive director of Brookline for Racial Justice and Equity, where he lives with his family in Brookline, Massachusetts. And he's also a dad raising a beautiful daughter and a loving husband. So there's nothing you don't do. So
That's right.
Nice, bro. So, obviously, very impressive resume. You've accomplished so much, and I'm glad I was there to see a lot of the journey that you've been through, but the most world doesn't know much about you. So I guess to kind of start off, tell me, who is Raul Fernandez?
Yeah. Just a man standing in front of another man doing a podcast.
Nice.
My work, my life is really centered around equity, particularly racial equity. I grew up in El Barrio in Spanish Harlem, and then later on in the South Bronx, and come from a family of transit workers. My father worked at first cleaning the train cars at night, and then later on was a conductor, and then what they then called a motorman, which is now a train operator, which is what my sister does, and then later on worked in an office. My mother, for my whole life, had been a bus mechanic, working on the air conditioning units on the city buses, and so that was a big part of my life growing up. Is just spending time seeing working people like doing their thing, going after school, doing my homework in the break room at the train yard or the bus depot, and sort of really seeing my family lift itself up through these good union jobs that they were able to get. But I started off really, I remember us being on public assistance, living in public housing for a while, and going to typically under-resourced public schools. And sort of my whole story is about having an opportunity that led to another, that led to another, that led to where I'm right now. And it's the reason why I focus on education right now, because I know what it's done for me and what it does for so many other people. So I'm happy to get more into that. But, that for me is what I think about all the time, is how we can use education as a tool to help people lift themselves up.
Nice. And what was that opportunity that you talk about?
So when I was 4 years old, I actually was recommended for this talented gifted program in New York by this teacher, Miss Friedlander, and who had to decide who among the 4-year-olds in her class she was going to recommend for this program. I have a 3-year-old right now. I've been around 4-year-olds. I can't tell you which one's got promise and which one doesn't. In fact, nobody really can. I mean, they all have promises, the truth. But some get picked for this program and others don't. I get into the talented gifted program. That gets me to later on Manhattan East, which is an exam middle school, and then Bronx Science, an exam high school, all public schools, and then ultimately to Boston University. if I hadn't gone down that track, I would have gone to my neighborhood schools. By the time I'm in high school, I was living over by Stevenson High School, Stevo at the time. It's actually where Big Pun went to school.
Mhm.
But it was a school that was only graduating at the time 3 out of every 10 students that went there. That's 30% graduation rate. Never mind going on to places like BU. Meanwhile, Bronx Science was graduating everybody that went there. 99 to 100% of the students graduate and go on to places like BU or even better. So, like, that's the difference that having that kind of opportunity can make. And we've seen it's now 40 years later, and we still do the same things. We still have these talented and gifted programs. We still, hoard resources and provide them to some students. We water those flowers and we don't water other flowers. And then, I don't know, we sit around wondering why some are able to succeed and others aren't, right? And it's just, that's probably the most troubling thing is that you got people like me telling my story and so many other folks telling their stories, and it seems we still haven't learned the lessons yet.
No, it's true because sometimes you never know, especially as a kid, and it's probably same thing with you. You probably didn't. I don't know if you recognized it maybe when you were at the time that I was doing in something special, or maybe you're walking by, like you said, these other schools, and you're realizing I could have been there, but I'm on this path. I'm like, did you ever notice the differences early on, or was that more of a kind of reflective thing?
Well, bro, I mean, I go off to these other schools, but I still come back to the same neighborhood.
Hmm.
And by the time I went to to college, I don't know anybody else in my neighborhood that went to college. Doesn't mean nobody did, but I'm telling you, anybody I knew in my neighborhood a few years before me or even years after me, I don't know anyone that went to college, right? And so you recognize that there's, I'm living this different life, having these different experiences in school than I am at home. And yeah, there's that sense of dissonance like between the two. But I think I can better articulate today what those differences are, but I certainly felt them at the time.
Yeah, and not just you. I think we've had other people too who have talked about the difference a small opportunity can make, where you might not recognize what the differences would be, but the fact that you were able to get one of those has really kind of pinpointed you into a different trajectory. And since you kind of had this opportunity, did you feel when you did get to college that this yes, you got to college and that's helped you get there, but did you feel like it was still enough to help you out when you were in college, or were you still struggling, or did you have any struggles in college?
Still struggling in college too. So
Yeah.
I had applied at the time. I wanted to be an engineer. Like I wanted to build things like bridges and stuff like that. And I applied to the schools that my guidance counselor told me to apply to. So you want to be an engineer, you apply. It was 5 schools I applied to. And that was it. One of them was BU. BU I got into, and they actually gave me the most money.
Yeah.
So I didn't particularly like Boston when I visited, but that's where we were going. And
Look at you
and
now.
so yeah, but I got the acceptance letter, and it was, instead of being an acceptance to the College of Engineering, it was an acceptance to the Science and Engineering program, which I'd never heard of and didn't apply to. But it turns out that was a bridge program, and it was a 2-year program. You do well enough there, and then you can get into the real College of Engineering. But when I actually started going to the classes, I noticed that like that's where all the Black and Latino kids that were into STEM were. Like we were all in the same place. And it wasn't long before like people started dropping out, because it was, whereas like some bridge programs, if they're done right, are intended to like help you succeed or lift you up. This was like really felt like it was intended to weed people out. And at some point I didn't want to leave BU, but I didn't want to be in that program anymore. And I went to talk to the director about it because I wanted to be in communications, which is what I ultimately graduated with. But I had to get his signature to leave the program, and he told me, we don't like people coming in the back door of the university and then deciding they want to be somewhere else.
Oh wow.
Oh yeah.
How did that make you
So
feel?
I was enraged. I was so upset. I literally, this guy, his name was Chip. I literally cursed him out like hard.
Oh
I
wow.
mean, I like slew of expletives. I don't even remember what I said, but it was bad. And then at the end of it, I said something to the effect of like, "Do you really want a fucking kid like me in your fucking stupid program?" and and he said, no, I don't. And then he signed the paper and he released me. I was like, good. But it was, it was hard. It was like getting acclimated to this overwhelmingly white environment was difficult. I remember being on an orientation tour where they were like so excited because the BU had just won a national championship, but then they were like in hockey, and I was like, damn, this place is white. And it's harder in a big university like that to find your people. Which is why when I found like Latinos Unidos, which was one of the Latino student groups that was around at the time, and also ultimately the fraternity Field Alpha, like that, I found like a place where I could have support because I didn't feel like I was getting it from the administration. I didn't feel like I was getting it from faculty or anybody else. And having that peer support is probably what kept me around at BU, including when I was switching over. I had to take a semester off. And I also had to figure out how to pay for college because my father said, I sent you there to be an engineer. If you want to be something else, you can pay for it. And he wasn't bluffing.
Yeah.
He just stopped for college. That was it. It was done. And so, now I have like this path I want to go on. I know I want to be in the College of Communication. I feel good about that. But Angela, the advisor at Comms, telling me I can't get in with my grades from engineering. I said, what does that have to do with anything? I suck at engineering. Doesn't mean I'll suck at communications. So she's saying I'm not going to get in, but I'm going to still try anyway. And I got nowhere to live now because I got no money. And thankfully, it was actually brothers that put me up on a couch for a semester and let me, get my funds together. I worked as a security guard downtown on Milk Street. Early in the morning, I got the first tee every morning, like 4 or 5. I don't even know what time. Early before the sun rose, and I do that all day and make some money, and then found my way back into college. Took on tons of loans, which thanks Biden. I'm done with right now.
Oh, nice,
Like,
nice.
I ended up getting the public service loan forgiveness finally, but it was. I mean, it was so much in loans. I thought I was going to die with those, and pass them on to somebody else, I suppose. But that's what it was. It was really, really hard to find my way through, and I did not feel like I had the kind of supports that people deserve.
Yeah, and you mentioned the fraternity and the Latinos Unidos, and I just want to mention that you were one of the founders for our chapter at Boston University. And so, did you feel at the time that? And I know we'll come back later about some of the stuff you've done at Boston University, but did you also feel at the time that when you were there that there was something missing, and that's why you wanted to kind of create something and be more involved with something?
I felt like there was something missing from me, right?
Mhm.
I wasn't, because when the fraternity started, I was still in my freshman year, right? So I was, and we had guys that were seniors, juniors, sophomores, and then a couple of us, 2 of us that were in our first year, and so we were really, I think, responding to what the other guys were creating, and it felt like, when it, in an environment where you feel so out of place, where you feel so disconnected, so unsupported, to see in particular, like these men coming together and saying like, we're going to create something positive and supportive where, and also do more for our community on and off campus, like that just felt like really right to me and kind of what I needed. So, I'm a first year student at BU. I'm still selfish at that point. I'm not necessarily thinking about how much I'm gonna contribute and this and that. It's more like, what do I need? And this is one of the things I needed at that point.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure because of the fact that a lot of us roll in the same type of group that your needs also reflected on the needs of a lot of other people. So inadvertently, your selfishness still kind of helped out with a lot of other people moving forward. So,
Yeah.
so
But you recognize that like these kinds of spaces are so important that if they didn't exist, someone would try to create them tomorrow, right?
mhm,
And so there's been Latinos Unidos, there was Mecha, they merged to form Alianza Latina, but now there's all these other kinds of Latino organizations at BU too, and it's like sort of like an ecosystem of support and more faculty and staff engaging and supporting those students. It's so critically important to have those kinds of spaces. I think sometimes people think of, um, in terms of like racial identity, people as like finished products. These students are Black, and these students are Latino, and these students are whatever. But really, in terms of like racial identity development, like all people, I'm sure, but especially younger people are are like incomplete, and they're still forming their own identity as it relates to race and policy and just living in the world. So I always say, I came to BU Puerto Rican and I left Latino.
Hmm.
And now I really identify as a person of color. So even like my conception of self is broadened out further, and who I see myself in community with, like Puerto Rican, very limited, Latino, much broader, people of color, even broader than that, right? And who you see yourself as in others can change over time. And for so many of us, we're still trying to figure out like who we are in our own Latinidad, or like our own like race, our own ethnicity, our own, whatever it is. And having other people around us, even if it's not a program that's specifically, designed to work us through whatever, like having that space is so important. It definitely was for me.
Yeah, definitely. And so obviously you do eventually graduate from Boston University in communications. What was your next step after that?
Um, Working in the field, I ultimately ended up working in at a PR firm called Lois Paul and Partners that was high tech PR. I remember the big client at the time was IBM. This is when they had like Lotus as a product, if you remember that. And I was working there, just doing what you do, promoting stuff I didn't fully understand, to be honest with you. Working with like high tech journals and stuff like that. But I graduated in 2000, and something happened the very next year, that September, which was 9/11.
Hmm.
And interestingly, at the time when that happened, I was again living on a couch with brothers. I was supposed to have moved in somewhere in September of that year, and it didn't work out. So I had money, but I didn't have a place to live.
Hmm.
Guys put me up again. And so I remember when 9/11 happened. But after that, basically the dot-com bubble had already burst at that point. If you remember dot-com,
Hmm.
pet.com and all that kind of stuff. And so a lot of PR firms were in trouble already. In fact, my firm had already had a round of layoffs. And in that round of layoffs, I actually got promoted to somebody else's job who got laid off because I was cheaper,
Hmm.
right? And so they
Hmm.
put me in that person's job, right? But then after 9/11, the economy really tanked, and the PR firm basically closed up shop. They kept a few people on in case there might be new business in the future, but the rest of us all got laid off at that point. And there were really no jobs to be had for a while. And so I was getting these unemployment checks, and one of the brothers at some point says, "Hey, I'm down here in Miami. We have a 3-bedroom apartment, only two of us living in it. If you want to come down here, ride it out for a while, like come through." I was like, "Bet, I'm out." It was if you worked in PR, like you could not find a job at that point. It was just impossible. And so I went down there, and that became like about 3, almost 4 years of my life living in Miami. I started working. I got a graduate degree down there, and just lived down there for a while. Worked in communication at Barry University, um, before I finally made my way back up north at Northeastern University, and then ultimately BU, where I've been for the last was it 16 years now? Oh,
Yeah.
18 years
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
When did you come back up to Boston from sunny Miami?
I was having a good time in Miami, but it didn't feel like a serious place to me,
Hmm.
to be honest. I remember like lots of just conversation about Britney Spears, but not much else. And she was a singer, you may remember at the time. Anyway, but it was I just remember feeling like disconnected from the real world living down there. I mean, I was literally living on South Beach at some point,
Hmm.
with another brother, and it just felt like not real to me. And I think I wanted to get back up north, seasons and all that kind of stuff.
Nice, nice. And then you said you went to Northeastern.
Yeah, I worked at Northeastern for a year in the PR department there, which was a hot mess.
Hmm.
But but yeah, I came up to for that job, and it was. Let's say I'd been there a year, and at some point, the place where I worked at BU, the Howard Thurman Center, the assistant director, the first ever assistant director, was leaving, and she actually had lived on my floor freshman year at BU, Warren Towers. And she said, "Hey, Raul, I'm leaving this job, but I think you'd be good for it." And it wasn't like we were like very close, so we didn't like hang out or anything. But she's like, "I think you'd be good for this job." And I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, let me take a look at it." And it was interesting, and I applied. It was basically this community space, really a community space that really attracted a lot of students of color to it, but wasn't specifically only for students of color. And I applied and ended up getting hired for the job, and it was one of the best jobs I've ever had.
And did that change your trajectory a bit? Like, are you doing a lot of PR stuff?
Yeah, I basically left PR behind at that point. I mean, you still have comm skills, which benefit in different ways, but I left it behind at that point. I had, when I was working in PR, I had some bad experiences at Northeastern where they, at some point tried to get me to do PR for this report, which was like, I mean, I've never like I've seen like I guess I've seen worse science, but this one was really bad, and it was basically a report that was done ostensibly by this faculty member from Northeastern, but it was funded by the Center for Immigration Studies, which is bills itself as nonpartisan, but every piece of research they've ever put out is that immigrants are terrible. They're just horrible. They're bad for the economy. Just immigrants are bad. And so they're just a really well-known BS think tank that just tries to popularize research about immigrants being terrible. And so I was really surprised that we were even going to promote this thing. And so I told them that I wouldn't do it, that there was junk science. There was no new research. They just took existing data and crunched it in a certain way that told the story they wanted to tell. And I was told that I had to do it anyway, and that I should think about what it meant for my career and all that kind of stuff, and maybe I should sleep on it. And I just told them I could sleep on it if you want. I'm just happy to give you the same answer tomorrow,
Mhm.
but I'm not doing it. And I think from that point on, they were like, "Well, he's not a team player," all that kind of stuff. But from my perspective, it was, you gotta have some kind of, when it comes to your values and things like that, you gotta have some kind of line that you're not willing to cross.
Yeah.
Um, and it's a real shame that they tried to push me past that line, even after I made it clear that it was there. But so I wasn't long for that job. Those folks were bad business. I don't know that department's even improved since then. It's been many years. But I definitely was like, I got to get out of here. And it just happened that the BU opportunity came up.
Yeah, and so the Howard Thurman Center that you worked at, can you tell me a little bit about what that was and what it meant? Because you said it was very it attracted a lot of people of color, and it
Yeah,
kind of evolved with time, I think, as well. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
yeah. It's the Howard Thurman Center for Common Ground. It I mean, just a wonderful space it was. I mean, now it's in a different location, a different vibe. I don't really know as much about it now, but at the time, it was like a living room in the campus, and BU is a place that never did really understand or make space for people to engage in their own identity development. And so, whereas Northeastern, for instance, has long had an African American center, John D. O'Brien Center, Latino Student Cultural Center, Asian American Center, and other spaces like that. BU never has, and still doesn't to this day. BU finally opened its first center for LGBTQ students after decades of students sort of agitating and advocating for such a space, but have never had a space like that for folks of color. The closest thing that existed was the Howard Thurman Center, and so even though it was never in any way, you can't find anything in the sort of the mission statement or anything that says this is for kids of color, whatever. Um, as I mentioned before, these spaces are so important that folks will find a way to make the space where they can. And so that's exactly what happened at Thurman Center. And so there were many students that came to programs there from all different backgrounds, but you would routinely see Black and Latino students and Asian students like spending a lot of time there. When they were just grabbing lunch, they'd come down and eat there. When they were between classes, they wanted to study, they would come hang out there. And then there was a lot of programming by student groups that was taking place there too.
Yeah, it's I remember my freshman year, which I think was in 2001, so right there in like 9/11. I think you're right. You come into college campus, you feel like a small number in a big pond that you're not used to, and it's a different ocean for you, and you're just sitting at every dining room table, and you're looking at, like, I think that person's Latino. Maybe I can go talk to them. I see that person. And then you go to these clubs and you go slowly, you start building your thing, and having a centralized location for that really, I think, makes a difference for the comfort level. And that comfort level, I think, makes college less hard. I think when you're not worried about stuff and you're not anxious and you're not, your emotions have a big impact on how you do in college. And when you're feeling more comfortable,
Hmm.
they do make a big difference in that. So, I remember when the Howard Thurman, I think it was, I was in school when that started, and I think I was at my tail end when you started working there as well. So,
Right.
we did a lot of stuff there. So it was good times. But
Hmm.
obviously during this time, and you've gone through all this stuff. Um, Obviously you go get your PhD as well, um, and I think your focus was it educational inequalities for the PhD?
Yeah. So I was so at that point, I worked for 5 years at the Howard Thurman Center, and then I switched to go work at Student Activities to be like their associate director. And the dean of what was then called the School of Education, now it's called B. Wheelock College of Education and Human Development. But the dean there, Hardin Coleman, who knew me through, I don't know, programming, whatever stuff we did, probably through the Thurman Center. And he was like, "Have you thought about doing a doctorate?" I'm like, "Not really. I don't know. I guess maybe." And he kind of convinced me to do it. And fortunately, when you work at a university, you get typically some kind of tuition remission that either covers all of, or in the case of BU, most of the cost of getting a degree. And so I was able to work at the university while doing part time a doctoral program, and it took me about 5 years to get that degree and get it done. And I'll tell you, I was like good. I was my trajectory was maybe to be like a dean of students or something like that, and I hadn't been thinking about a doctorate before he brought it up. But when he did bring it up, the thing that I thought about was actually my mom, who had tried, like, had these like starts and stops trying to get a bachelor's degree, and just like never could get it done. I mean, she went to multiple schools multiple times trying to do a class here, do a class there, but never was able to earn that degree. And so for me, I was like, this is something that I could do. I have the ability to do it. I have like the privilege to be able to do this, to like earn this degree. It would feel wrong not to do it because I knew I could, and I had the personal ability to do it, but also the luxury to do it as well. And so I sort of committed myself to doing it, but sort of in her honor. She's still around, but like in her honor, to be able to give that degree to her, which because the reason she wasn't able to get her own degree was because she was taking care of us, and like looking after us, and also working. She wasn't, she was doing all the things, and which made it difficult for her to be able to do that for herself. And
Yeah.
so it's important for me to do that.
Yeah, no, I think you know, it's a continual thing. I think that you're talking about, where it's like there's been these opportunities that have kind of presented themselves in your life, whether it's a nudge in the direction to, go get your doctorate or something like that. And I think for a lot of us, the idea of risk, in taking those opportunities, especially when you have an opportunity, because there's always, as you go with life, there's always situations where I can't go now. I have kids, I have family, I have to do stuff, and there's good reasons where it might delay you even more. But just, building the courage to kind of come up and say, yeah, maybe I should take this opportunity, and what's the worst that can happen in doing that? I think that's something we challenge ourselves, as Latinos, of, you know, taking that risk, because our families always, I always go really risk averse. Just go to work, make some money, shut up, and be happy with what you have. Don't try to do too much. So, but that's good,
Yeah.
man. And so, did was your doctorate? Is that when you started doing the education inequalities, or was that kind of something afterwards?
Yeah, yeah. So it was in education. I mean, my doctorate itself, like my dissertation, was like about something else. It was not unrelated, but it was about student trustees. So students that are on boards of trustees, which is not. It's more common in public institutions, less common in private institutions like BU. But what I was trying to understand is like the ways in which students can exercise power on college campuses. And I knew a lot about student activism and organizing and working through student groups and student government and all that. But this idea that there could be students that sit at the sort of the highest level, the biggest decision makers, the people who literally can hire and fire the president, the board of trustees, and was trying to understand how they utilize that power. And so I studied student trustees in the UMass system, so across the various different colleges in UMass system, and during periods from like the late '60s up until more recently, but including during the time of like students trying to get universities to divest from apartheid South Africa, students trying to get universities in some cases to like not invest in athletics and to keep money focused on to the educational mission, to keep tuition from going up, like all the things that like now we see how much tuition has skyrocketed, and students were trying to stop that from happening. How much our colleges are about things that have nothing to do with learning in some cases, and students were trying to stop that, and how much our colleges many of them bring in so much money and have make investments in really problematic ways, and how students were trying to stop that. It's just really interesting to study. But I think also because of my work in administration, which really was it sort of got me more focused on the inequities that we see on college campuses, and then through my doctoral studies, understanding more of the history of colleges and how they weren't built for all of us, not even most of us, and how we see the legacy of that today. I started digging more and more into that, and really have carved that out as a niche for myself within the world of higher education. And then even more recently, um, taking that a step further and thinking through what that looks like through the lens of policy and legislation, and how shifts in policy might make our campuses more inclusive and equitable. And so that's been a big focus for me lately.
Yeah. It's one of those things where every time you dig a little bit, you always find something else behind it, and it's always something else above. And if you keep climbing that ladder until you get to the top, and that's where the big change happens. So,
Mhm.
so I guess to kind of talk a little bit about some of your expertise. Like what are some of these inequalities that you see facing students nowadays?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've sort of uh, gotten rid of a lot of the prohibitions that used to exist, right? Like women couldn't go to college. There were quotas on the number of Jewish students that can go to college. There were, prohibitions on, well, certainly when folks were enslaved, they weren't allowed to engage in education. But even after that, there were limits on who could be in college based on race and ethnic identities, immigration status, all of it. The one that still seems to exist is around income and whether or not you could afford it. And the truth is that there are at some of the best colleges out there right now, there are young people, especially, who are getting into those colleges but can't afford to go to them. And that's still perfectly legal, and that's what we do now. Some colleges have stepped up and increased financial aid, especially for people at the lowest income levels. But that still holds true as well. And then meanwhile, as I said, the rising cost is leading so many more people to go into debt for something that everyone tells them they need. So if you don't get this degree, you're not going to earn as much money as folks that do, or you're not going to have the same opportunities. And now that job that used to require a high school degree, which requires a bachelor's degree. By the way, the one that requires a bachelor's degree now requires a master's degree, and you just have to like keep doing this thing. I think that's a really big issue across the board. When you start thinking also about the racial inequities on college campuses, the legacy of exclusion that has sort of created this environment where so many students of color still feel like it not feel like, but clearly understand that these spaces weren't built for them, and that our faculty and even staff still don't reflect the student body today, which is significantly more diverse than it's ever been, and there's need for changes there as well. And then on a policy level, we have a changing landscape out there. You have the Supreme Court that just undid what we knew as affirmative action in not a total way, but in a major way. And we have states across the country that are banning what I do. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, the classes I teach, the work that I do here in Boston, I couldn't do in a growing number of states across the country right now. And so, understanding why that's happening, what the implications are, and what we intend to do about it is a really important thing to focus on right
Yeah, yeah, and you touched upon a lot of different things, and so but one of the things that hit hard, I think, was the economic aspect of things, where um, my dad is a immigrant from Peru, truck driver. I knew from the get go that we couldn't afford college, so the only way to get there would be get good financial aid or take out loans. And when I get to college and I completely mess it all up and screw myself out of most of my financial aid, and I'm paying extra classes and doing that stuff, and then I,
now. Right.
fortunately graduate, but then then I'm stuck with like $60,000 in debt, and the burden of I'm 20 years out of college, and I'm still like, man, if I can get rid of these loans, I'd have an extra $600 a month. Just
Right.
and that's a
Right.
big chunk of change. That's a luxury car. That's savings. That's a lot of extra money I could be doing with, and I make good money. You know what I mean? It still hurts. And
But what's even worse is that there are people out there with the same debt and didn't get the degree. And
yep,
so a significant portion of that student debt that's out there are people that took classes, enrolled in programs, couldn't finish, but it doesn't mean that they don't owe that money. They still do, and they've got nothing to show for it.
yeah, yeah. And so I think like I'm big when I talk to like younger kids and generations, like teach the economics of a college degree as well, because we grew up in that the degree is more important than anything. Do whatever you have to do to get a degree. When you get out of college, you're going to make so much money. It's going to be worth it. It's worth taking out these loans. You're going to be able to afford everything. This is the pipe dream you're going to have in college, 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 college. And then 9/11 happens and you're making $15 an hour with a bachelor's for the next 15 years before you start making any good money, and your student loans are kicking in. So it's been a
Right. Right.
shitty ride. it's a, and I can't
Mhm.
wait till, I don't have any more student loans. I'm looking forward to that day. I think I'll probably be like 65 when that happens at this point. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so no, but that's awesome, man. It's I'm glad, and you mentioned a lot of stuff about policies and things like that. So
Yep.
you are proactive outside of what you do in higher education. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the stuff you do outside, and why you feel those are important?
Yeah, and some of the stuff are connected to the work and how, I mean, it's all connected, but
Yeah.
some of it's directly connected. So, in this work on the Racial Imbalance Advisory Council that I chair, we're looking at segregation in Massachusetts schools, which exists still today. This is the 70th anniversary of Brown v. Board, and our schools are significantly segregated across the country, especially surprisingly for some in the Northeast. And in Massachusetts, we've been digging into the data. We're going to present a report in June to the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education that shows significant gaps between the experiences and outcomes of students in intensely segregated non-white schools. So schools where the overwhelming percentage of students, literally 90% plus of the students are Black and or Latino, compared with intensely segregated white schools where almost all students are white. We're seeing huge gaps related to chronic absenteeism, to test scores, to basically every measure imaginable that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education tracks and requires that districts send them. Um, you'd certainly rather be in an intensely segregated white school than an intensely segregated non-white school by a long shot.
Mhm.
And it is, I mean, some of it it's really, when you think about it, heartbreaking, because we know, because we've got a voluntary desegregation program called MECO in Massachusetts, where students, if they get in as a lottery, if you get in, you could actually leave, let's say, the Boston public schools, where you might end up in one of those intensely segregated schools and end up in a different district that's more racially balanced. And we just saw some research come out this year that shows that the kids that actually just get moved, they still live in the same neighborhood, by the way. They just go to a different school, kind of like I did.
Mhm.
They just go to a different school, that the outcomes for those kids in terms of test scores, in terms of graduation, in terms of getting into college, all of it are significantly better compared with students who also applied to that same program but didn't get it. And so we know it ain't the kids; it's the environment.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, for so many of these kids, they're being placed in environments where the odds are stacked against them in terms of being able to succeed. And it's not just unfortunate; it's unacceptable, and in fact, it's unconstitutional.
Mhm.
And so, I wouldn't be surprised after our report comes out if there's not, legal action trying to remedy the problems that we're seeing across the Commonwealth, particularly Boston, Springfield, other places like that. And so that's some of the work right there, is really trying um, to draw attention to this issue of segregation. Related to that, there are bills that would attempt to put more teeth into the oversight around issues related to segregated schools. Would put more funding toward addressing these issues, and those are the kinds of things that I think after we put this report out, and part of the report will be supporting those bills, but really getting behind, shifting the legislation so that this isn't allowed to continue with so little engagement. It's really sad. Like, we ask questions about, like, the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education is supposed to send a letter to districts when they're out of compliance with what we have a law called the Racial Imbalance Law, that doesn't that makes it illegal to have the kinds of school systems that we see right now. And we asked in the last 20 years, how many times has the board sent a letter like that to a district? And the answer was zero. And so even the body that's supposed to be doing oversight hasn't been doing the oversight.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing, and like I said, it's not just unfortunate; it's unacceptable. And so that's really important work at the local level. You mentioned I'm the executive director of Brookline for Racial Justice and Equity, and so in the community where I live in Brookline, it's a nonprofit organization that's looking to build an informed, motivated, and organized constituency around racial justice, but really as a method of policy change, to start to build a constituency that says we need something different here. We need greater access, greater housing affordability, for affordability in childcare, so that underpaid people, especially people of color, can afford to live here.
Mhm.
We need to feel more included, more part of the, represented in elected and appointed positions, and like their civil rights protections. And then we need more access to opportunity. The schools should work as well for us as they do for anyone else. And even in our schools, we see big gaps based on Black and Latino students compared to the white and Asian students in our schools. And then also around economic opportunity. I was just looking at a report that shows actually Massachusetts has the biggest gap in 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 income between white and Latino residents. Connecticut's second, by the way.
Yeah.
Rhode Island's on the list too. It's actually interesting. There's a lot of blue states where you
Mhm.
see the big gap there, and so addressing those kinds of inequities are really important too.
Yeah, I think they're growing up in Rhode Island. Rhode Island's a small, um, you know, micro, maybe micro level compared to a lot of other big places where there's a lot more population. But you can see the stark differences where it's like this is Providence. Everything that touches Providence is still kind of hood, kind of ghetto, kind of poor, and then it just rolls out and gets really white and a lot
Mhm.
more money. And I remember we went
Right.
to go play baseball against Barrington, which is one of like the biggest schools in one of the richest schools in Rhode Island. And we go there and we're JV, by the way, because I started I didn't play baseball till like my senior year, even though I wanted to since freshman year, and I
Mhm.
just figured I wanted to do at least one season before I graduate, and I did baseball. I was in JV, and JV team were wearing the old uniforms from our previous, whatever varsity stopped wearing. They have holes, they have dirt, they have stains, they're just all beat up. And we get to this JV game, and these guys have custom jerseys with their names on it, with fitted hats with their names on the back of the hats. And I'm like, we're gonna lose. We're gonna lose. We're gonna lose. And we did. We got our asses whooped. But it's like, but it was like that was a prime example of what you're talking about on a baseball field, let alone like, in society and stuff like that, where it's just, we're 30 miles away and it's a completely different world, So,
Yep,
yeah,
absolutely.
and so you obviously you're a lecturer too, and when you're teaching, what are some of the things you talk about when you teach with your students?
Yeah. Well, I think really understanding the interplay between so I teach a couple courses. One on what's called diversity and justice in education around social justice and ed. Another one on school segregation, and then others that are about more like the history of higher education or current issues in higher education, those kinds of things, and really understanding the interplay um, between activism, advocacy, like those who want to push for greater equity in education, the interplay between that and also policy legislation. Like, how do you actually get it done? How do and what are the headwinds? What are the tailwinds? Like, what can what supports you have, but also what's working against you, and then also what the trends are out there, right? So recently I did a presentation um, that came out of some research, which was looking at the impact of these policies that are proliferating across all these different states, Florida, Texas, Oklahoma, Idaho, everywhere, that are like banning books and DEI and also anti-trans, all this stuff, right? And I was trying to understand like where it's coming from now, right? Because it's not like folks all of a sudden decided they didn't like this stuff, but now it's really like starting to happen, and what led to that. But in understanding that, I came across the the voter registration statistics for Florida, and Florida is a state that actually you can see when people register to vote, they have to declare a party. They can declare Republican, Democrat, unenrolled, they can independent rather, and I probably some other parties, but those are the ones that are the most popular. And what we're able to see over time is like how those numbers have changed. And so, I was talking with our students about is, you get Ron DeSantis coming into office in 2019, right, the governor there, and then you have COVID hitting in 2020. And one of the things Ron DeSantis did in COVID, he said, don't worry about vaccines, don't worry about masks, everybody's going to school. Like, it was crazy,
Mhm.
right? But you know what? People loved it. And massive amounts of people moved to Florida because they wanted their kids in school, because they wanted to be able to go to nightclub. They wanted to be able to not wear a mask, not get a vaccine, all that kind of stuff. And what we start to see is a shifting of the registered voters away from Democrats, which had a 250,000 voter advantage when he got elected. And then after that really starts to sort of eat away at that. Then comes 2021, where he starts his campaign against woke and starts all the Don't Say Gay bill and all the other bills that everybody probably knows about at this point. And what's happening there is more people love that and are moving to Florida. And at the same time, there's a lot of people who vote Democrat that are leaving Florida because they don't want to live like that, right? And then also the stuff, the Roe v. Wade decision, abortion, and people are like, I'm out of here. And so we're at the point now where before he took office, or even when he took office, Democrats had a $250,000 voter advantage. Now Republicans have 1 million person registered voter advantage, and which is significantly changed Florida from a swing state, which Obama won and then Trump won, to really a red state. I mean, it's just properly red state at this point. And I think those numbers are going to go even up for Republicans as more people register before the election. So understanding the implication of that, of that playbook. I don't think Ron DeSantis is some genius that's like, here's what I'm going to do. Oh, COVID's coming. Let me do this. And then I'm going to start doing these. I think he's just doing things, right?
Mhm.
But other people watch that and they say, wow, that really seems to be working. Like, you can do crazy things like this and still be in office. In fact, if you're crazy enough, then people will leave who don't like it. People will move there who love it. And you actually solidify your power. See the exact same thing happening in Texas right now, and some other Texas, which was almost purple. It wasn't
Yeah.
It was always red, but it was almost purple. There's more Latinos than anybody else who live in Texas right now. A lot of them Republicans though. And and we don't know enough about Texas data because they don't actually keep their voter registration in the same way. But it almost felt like Texas might go blue at some point. I don't know about that anymore. Greg Abbott's basically run the same plays, and we see the same thing happening. And so nationally, we're starting to see that. I don't in recent memory, right? Going back to the civil rights era, certainly, but in recent memory, I don't know that it's been this different to live in a state in a long time. Meaning the difference between what rights you have access to, what books you have access to, what kind of healthcare you have access to, is significantly. I mean, it's a significant difference between Massachusetts and Florida, and in many other states, right? It's just significantly different. And because of that, and because that these laws have been passed by state legislatures in which power has become concentrated, meaning even if the governor goes away or just decides not to run again and somebody else becomes governor, in order to change these laws, you need the legislature to change the laws. And that's unlikely to happen anytime soon. And there will be challenges to these laws, but they're going to end up at the Supreme Court. And we know what that Supreme Court looks like, which means that these differences in living in this state versus that state are going to they're going to persist for a very long time. And I think are going to lead to some meaningful shifts in population towards some of those states, and in some cases away from some of those states, and more political concentration, more polarization, essentially, in these places. And so that ain't good. It's not good for United States. And it also means it ain't good for the people that stay in places because they don't really have many other options. And so we talk a lot about that and what that means for us. I mean, for undergraduate admissions, for instance, I think a lot more students now are thinking about the policies in the states where they're applying to colleges in a way that they probably didn't before. Right? I'm applying to college. I'm not applying to a state, but now people are really thinking about that. I think that's gonna have some meaningful impact on where people go to college, especially at a decision making point, right? Like, you don't necessarily think about moving. You got to move my whole life, but if I'm going to go to college anyway, I'm moving anyway. Where am I going to go? And so those are the kinds of things that we're trying to focus our attention on and then think about, because what we've seen is who the president is makes a big difference on what life is like on college campuses and what life is like, period. And then also which party is exercising power either at the federal level or the state level. The distinction between living in this state and in that state is just going to grow, and it's going to impact especially where people decide they want to live, if they're at the decision point of going to college, not just what college they want to go to, but what state they want to live in while they're in college and maybe stay afterwards. It's going to lead to a meaningful shift, especially for anybody who does anything related to equity work or education, teaching, diversity work, all that kind of stuff. I can't imagine doing what I do right now in Florida. I don't think I'd be able to, right? Not in a meaningful, authentic, honest way, without fear of reprise or repercussions. I couldn't. And so, I think it's something that we have to pay really close attention to. And, we got election coming up, and I think that might lead to even further impacts for the people that can least afford them.
Yeah. And that was a lot. You touched
I
on
would say in my work, I always tell my students, my job's not to make you happy and make you feel good about anything. It's to tell you where things stand.
Yeah.
And it's not like I'll say it's not like it's like, oh, I think things are going to be really bad, but I don't know what I'm talking about. It's like, no, things are already bad.
Yeah.
I was telling you years ago it's going to get bad. It's pretty bad right now. And what I'm telling you now is it can actually get worse. And I don't get any joy out of sort of making that prediction or providing a lot of evidence that that's going to be the case. But I think we have to be going with eyes open and make decisions, make political decisions, make life decisions, understanding the situation that we're in, and how it's likely that this isn't just going to all of a sudden we'll wake up one day and everything's going to be good again. We're going to be living with this for a while.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like owning a home. You always have like two types of people that own a home. It's like the person who pays attention to every crack in the foundation and says, okay, something's coming up. Let me keep an eye on it. And then you have the other guys who are like, hey, is this hole in my wall supposed to be here? Is this okay? And then the house comes, so yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's keeping your eye on that. I think it's important, especially for people of color where, you know, we tend to get the short end of the stick sometimes. Like if we're not vigilant on what's going on around us, we're gonna get caught up again. And we need to be able to make sure that we know what's going on, regardless of which way you think it's the right way. You should be vigilant. So, but yeah, man. Um, so I know on campus you've done a whole bunch of stuff on campus. I think you told me a little bit earlier about this Latinx graduation that you guys are hosting at Boston University. Can you tell me something about a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. This is the first time that BU is holding this sort of Latinx student graduation. It's for undergrad and graduate students that are graduating from BU. It's going to be this really dope celebration. I think last I heard, over 200 graduates have like registered to be there with their families and everything. So we had a lot of people there, and they asked me to give a speech at the thing. I have to put that together real quick. It's next week. But I was thinking about it, it's interesting that BU, and it's really driven by students and an advisor that are making this happen. So this isn't to give the university administration credit for saying we should be honoring Latino students. That's not happening. The students are making this happen, right? And working to get some money from the administration to make it happen. But this is happening for the very first time at BU at a time when similar celebrations in other parts of the country are either being defunded or banned. Which is like, talk about like, come on, like if you don't want the curriculum to make white people feel bad because white people in the past did bad things, like, or even today, like if you want that, okay. If you think certain books are too salacious for kids to read, okay. But the idea that you're gonna say that these folks can't come together and celebrate their accomplishments in a world where not enough of us get to that point
Mm-hmm.
to have that celebration, and you're not going to fund it and you're not going to allow it to happen, it's just, I mean, it's just absolutely, it's offensive is what it is. And so I remember I was in Texas at UT Austin recently, and learned about how their celebration got canceled. Thankfully, alums and some others have come together, put some money together so that they can do it for their Latino students there. Even though the university is not supportive of it, it just makes it even more important that in places where we can do these kinds of things, that we do it and we do it big, and that we show out and come together. I think it's going to be so great because it's not just about the students, but it's also about their families and their friends, and recognizing the faculty. I'm inviting faculty and staff to come out and recognizing just like how much it takes to get one of us there, and how many people it takes, how many supports, how many opportunities to make it from here to there, and to really celebrate that. I just think it's so important. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, no, it's dope. I mean, when you made the announcement about that in our group chat, I was like, yo, that's awesome because we come into college, we feel like I mentioned before, like you're just a little brown dot in a white wave. You don't know, you don't feel like you belong, and then you make your life on campus. You make a community, you build something of yourself on campus. Then you get your graduation, and for people who don't know, BU is a big school. There's 5,000 people at my graduation. Like thousands of people at graduation, and you're like, all right, well, at least I got my friends here. And then you get split up into your smaller graduation based off of your major, and there's even less people I know. And it's like, oh, I got like one or two Latino friends that are at the graduation, maybe some of your friends can go to one and you might not see the other ones. You don't get to see some of the people you've literally been spending every week at these meetings, at these groups, at these events, building your family, your community on campus, and you don't get to see them graduate because you've been split up, you've been
Right.
separated, so that's awesome, man. I think, it helps hopefully make everybody feel better about what they're doing and gives them an opportunity to feel like, hey, I get to see my family graduate as well, not just myself, so
Yeah, yeah.
kudos to you on that, man. That's freaking awesome, man. So and so usually around the tail end of my conversation, I like to kind of come back and ask you to kind of reflect on your life and think about hey, if I could go back and talk to a younger version of Raul and give him some advice, what's something you'd tell yourself?
Mm. Oh man. Um, I think I think we don't spend enough time when we're younger thinking about and understanding like finances. I remember when and maybe it was still happening when you were there. I'm not sure, but there used to be in the student center, they used to be the tables were there, and there would be all these credit card companies, and they would have remember Discover Card and all that, and they would have these T-shirts and be like, "Hey, here, sign up for a credit card. We'll give you a T-shirt." And everybody's like, "Oh, I want a T-shirt," and then literally signed up for a credit card, immediately went into debt, and took years to pay at 25% interest rate or whatever ridiculous number it was, and then took forever to pay off like $9,000. Ended
Mhm,
up taking over a decade to pay off, right?
mhm,
And so that's the kind of stuff that I wish I would have known about when I was younger to watch out for. And it's, some of it's natural. Like when you're young, you don't think about being 50 or 60 or whatever it is, right? Like
mhm,
you don't think about that. But at the same time, I think there are folks that have the social capital around them, like folks that like get understand credit scores and get their kids from when they're the youngest age possible, they get them into the system to be able to start building their credit score and have that credit age that's so important to your score and all that kind of stuff. And it is, as far as I can tell, even for those of us that also we bachelor's degrees like everybody else, masters like everybody else, doctor like everybody else, are still not in the same place financially as people who had that social capital and who had that generational wealth. And so I think a lot about how do we help people build that for themselves, when they don't have all that to begin with. And if I go back to myself, I'd be like, all right, here's the deal. You're gonna be around for a while. I know when you're young, you don't know how long, you're not thinking about that far along, but you're gonna be around for at least a little while. Um, you're gonna have a kid and this whole family, and you have a lot of responsibilities at some point. Here's a couple things. Just get yourself ready for that. I think that's it. Other than that, I mean, you know, I made lots of mistakes. I don't really believe in sort of going back and regrets and everything. I think the only thing I regret from undergrad is not studying abroad. And I maintain that the only reason I didn't is because no one even mentioned it to me. As if somebody that was older and that I respected said, "Hey, you should go study abroad first," I probably would have done it. I
mhm,
just no one did.
yeah,
No one ever mentioned it.
yeah,
But outside of that, it just um, like I feel good where I'm at, and if I start going back and changing things, then I wouldn't be where I'm at right now.
mhm,
So
yeah,
I feel pretty good about where I'm at, and I wouldn't do that. But I think if there was anything I could do to sort of get to where I am now, not professionally, but just like mentally, like understanding, seeing the world as it is. If I can get there sooner, I probably want to do that. But I also had some good years in there where I was just a hot mess having a good time.
yep.
So I wouldn't want to take that away from me
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
either.
don't take away my fun times.
Yeah,
And it's
those
funny
years
you
were
mentioned those credit card things because I remember they were still when I was an undergrad. It was they were there all over the place, and there was a time where I was a broke kid. Um, I had credit cards that I wasn't paying off because I did what you're talking about. I signed up for credit cards and racked them up, and then couldn't afford to pay them off, and so my credit was shit. And I'm walking home from class, and they're giving out a free Domino's pizza if you sign up for a credit card. So I had no money, I had no
right,
dinner, and so I was like, sure. And I signed up for a credit card. I knew it was going to get denied, but I got a free pizza out of it. So yeah, yeah, no, they,
right,
they were
right.
there, and they were giving you stupid shit for for your credit. It's like
Oh, wow, man.
that, like the what's it called, the apple in Adam and Eve. It's like, here's a pizza and I'll take your soul. It's like, yeah,
Hmm.
I'm gonna take your credit score with me. But yeah, no, they're assholes about that. So
Yeah. But that's I think, as I think about like that, like economic development stuff, it's really in community. It's really what I'm focused on right now. Like outside of education, is like how do we help people level up? You noticed earlier, as I talked about people being underpaid, not low income,
mhm,
because low income almost like seems like it's saying something about them,
mhm,
right? But underpaid says something about the system because there's people that work jobs just as hard as anybody. They do all the stuff the Republicans say they should do, right?
mhm,
You lift yourself up by go get a job. Not everybody's gonna start a business. Some people are gonna have to work like in minimum wage jobs and not necessarily be able to do that. But it's things that we either want people to do or need people to do, right? Like who wants to go to a restaurant, like like seat themselves, go in the back, make their own food, serve it to themselves, and then pay the bill on the way out. That's called being at home. You know what I
mhm,
mean? Like, but you want to go out. Well, if you want restaurants to exist, you got to recognize that people live off of what they make working there,
mhm,
right? And these are underpaid people who work their asses off, and it's not just in the restaurants, all kind of industries, and they just don't get paid enough to live somewhere, to put their kids in childcare, which they need to, and then also eventually to like maybe level up by having their kids go through college or whatever. And these are people that also are performing necessary functions, or at least things we want people to do in society. And so I just think really referencing like the fact that these folks are underpaid is really important, and thinking about how we can help them level up, by fighting for better minimum wages for everybody, and better benefits and time off, especially when you have a kid or taking care of somebody who needs it, and then also things like basic income, uh, that allow people you know the support they need and the dignity, to take care of themselves and their family. All those things are just like are to me no brainers and so important, and would improve everything else. Would improve educational outcomes, would improve health outcomes, would reduce crime, reduce homelessness, all things that would be really good. And it seems like it's the thing that people have the hardest time doing, is saying like, yeah, I'll give you anything. I'll create food pantries on every corner. I'll, whatever, those kinds of programs are fine. But the idea of just giving people more money is
mhm,
just so, and we have it is the problem. The thing is we have it. And just the idea of giving people more money, even when we have it, is just seems like so wrong, even to Democrats, by the way.
mhm. Yeah.
And I'm hoping that in this next generation we can shift
Mhm,
that, and understand that like we're going to get better outcomes for everyone, for society, if people have enough that they can afford to live safely, that they can have their kids taken well care of. I think that's really important. The last thing I'll say is, it lasted 2 years ago now, maybe. I had jury duty, and I was asked to serve on this jury. And I love jury duty. Some people are trying to get out of it, like openly, and I love it. I think it's great.
I
I
every
never,
time I'm on jury duty, I'm like, I hope I get picked.
yeah,
I'd love
yeah.
to be in court.
It's like I know I'll make a decent decision. I don't know about all these other people, so I'm gonna try to get on it. And so I did get picked, and I was like, all right, this is the first time ever. And it ended up being this case where everybody involved was Brazilian, everybody, and immigrants, and they lived in this building in Quincy and in Massachusetts, and basically all of them worked, minimum wage jobs or under the table jobs, like off the books kind of stuff, right? All of them. And these parents, for these two girls, they basically had no real options for affordable childcare. So there was a woman in the building that said, "I'll watch your kids."
Mhm,
And uh, long story short, at best, these kids were being basically sat in front of a TV for hours on end, and that was
mhm,
that was the kind of childcare they got. And at worst, what happened, unfortunately, sorry listeners, is that the two girls were molested by the husband of the woman that was running this unlicensed daycare in the building, right? And it was terrifying, it was traumatizing. All of us are crying in the courtroom and everything. But I'm also thinking about the difference between what those kids are getting and my kid, and how, because I'm not wealthy, but because I got enough to afford it, like my kid is in high quality childcare where I know she's safe every day. I get pictures throughout the day of what she's doing, notifications if anything happens, maybe she tripped or whatever. She's also being engaged the entire day with no screens, in with people who have degrees in early childhood education. The gap between what people with money can get for their kids at the earliest ages, before public school even starts,
Mhm.
and those who don't have money, the gap between what those two folks get is so big. It in my mind explains nearly everything about the gaps we see later on in education. Is those first 5 years before school even starts? Is my kid getting engaged in, also having, my wife and I, doing our part in it too, but nowhere near what these teachers are doing for her,
Mhm.
and how my daughter's language seems to have exploded every day.
Mhm.
He's got new words and talking about new things and having new experiences that I couldn't provide, right? Compared to what those girls faced in Quincy, and even without the horrors that they face, like even just not that kind of level of engagement in learning. The That right there, if we could focus on fixing one thing immediately, and sort of throwing whatever money we have available to that, is producing, making sure that there's high quality um childcare, for every kid out there, at no cost, frankly. Like, that would be the biggest thing that we can do. And so that's something I've been trying to push for here, and I'm going to be fighting to make that happen. But it's that alone, if people don't want to give money to families or all that kind of BS that people feel about that, I think that's wrong too. But at the very least, hopefully we can agree that the kids between the age of 0 and 5 deserve the best possible chance, to get a start in life.
Mhm.
We can get down on
Yeah, yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, I know it's a lot to unwrap on that one, but yeah, I mean, from the cost of childcare has gotten crazy. And so I can, when I was having my daughter when she was younger, she's 10 now, 7 years ago when we were dealing with this stuff, it was crazy trying to find a good daycare, and that's with making decent money, like you said, it's still back and forth whether or not, should we spend 300 more here or go that way? So it's scary when you have money, it's scary when you don't. So it's a good thing to change. But
that.
and excuse me. So I guess finally, my last actual question that I have is, how do you say success in Spanglish?
Mm. Man, I think for me it's about community. It's about, like, really, I any success I have is because there were other people that kept me from dropping out, other people that kept me from being homeless, other people that helped give me food when I didn't have it, who helped me out with money when I didn't have it. Just having that kind of safety net of people that are gonna, like hold you when you need it and lift you up when you need it, has made all the difference for me. And so, I think that's that more, there's a lot of pieces to success, Spanglish or otherwise, but for me, being in community, with you and the other fellas, and with all these other people where I live now, like how we look out for each other, like that's the thing that made the difference for me.
Nice. Awesome, man. Well, Raul, thank you so much, for everything. And I appreciate all the work you're doing out there at Boston University. And once again, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, brother.
I appreciate it. And so, for everyone else, thank you so much for joining. I hope you'll come back next time as we continue to learn how to say success in Spanglish.